When I was a kid, I was an avid reader. I used to read every single night before I went to bed, and now, all these years later, like many of you, I've replaced that habit with endless phone scrolling. And so in this video, I would like to explain why I'm getting back into reading and why I believe that it is more important now than ever before. If you're new here, hello and welcome. My name is Cooper, and I'm a recent college graduate documenting my journey as well as giving advice to you all here on this YouTube channel. So if that is something you are interested in, feel free to stick around. With series like Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, and Goosebumps, it was always the aspect of embarking on a new adventure or exploring a new world that attracted me to reading. And I think the main driver of this is the infinite passion of the imagination. And it's just that quality, or rather the absence of this quality, that I believe is the main cause and driver of this shift that we see today from people going from reading towards a more digital lifestyle. And I think that is primarily caused by two things, one being the school system and the second being the phone. First, the school system has turned reading into a chore rather than something that is pursued, right? And so how you get there is, as we all know, the traditional school system operates very much similar to an assembly line. We are but numbers, but parts in a long chain of parts that are going through the machine, being programmed with the same language, using the same books that are chosen by others rather than ourselves. And so what that eventually turns into is, instead of individuals seeking out content that fits their own wants and desires and things that they want to explore, it is now merely just another piece of content that we're force-fed with in order to meet some standard. And as for the second, with the phone, the presence of the digital world and of social media has killed the desire for lower dopamine level consumption, right? The way that the online space has been constructed is to give us short dopamine hits. You think about what's the booming industry and on social media. It's shorts, 15-second hits of dopamine. That is what we are now prioritizing over wisdom, over long-term, entertainment in the form of tangible books and tangible paper. We are now hooked onto this digital system, and this is backed up with data. The average person nowadays reads only 1 to 2 books per year, down from over 12 just a few decades ago. And so I think these are the two primary causes: the school system and phones, and the digital atmosphere are the two primary causes for why I fell out of reading and why many other people have fallen out of reading. And so, as someone who's drifted away from reading and drifted into the vast sea of digital content for many years now, I kind of want to offer my own personal reasons for why I've kind of woken up to this fact and why I'm deciding to prioritize reading and getting away from the phone and the online sphere, right? And I think it mainly comes from just me being tired of feeling like I can't produce thoughts of my own, the feeling of only being able to regurgitate things that were fed to me by others, being able to only talk about other people's ideas rather than my own ideas, the feeling of not being able to think for myself, to have no knowledge that was attained by my own free will and by my own, desire to learn, right? Feeling no connection to the historical authors and people who've written words for centuries, right? Feeling no connection, feeling like there's always been a middleman, that being social media and content creators who have translated that for their own purposes to create clicks and to get us hooked, and having that be the primary way that I've been learning. I've just woken up to that fact and just frankly had enough. I just want something that is more authentic and that is more real. And I think the best way to achieve that is by getting into reading and to explore the words of the greatest thinkers that have ever lived, and to explore those words, you know, through my own experiences, through me actually reading what these people have said and have written, rather than, listening or watching someone else's interpretation of those words. I think that's the primary reason for me chasing and trying to get back into reading, is the pursuit of knowledge for myself rather than, for consumption. Building off of this point, I want to shift away from, my personal viewpoints and why I'm getting into reading, and to more why I would advise and why I would say that it is important that society as a whole eventually move back to prioritizing reading and getting back into, reading. And that is because in a world full of short-term content and low attention spans, I think it is incredibly important to realize that reading strengthens our focus and it rewires our brains for longer periods of concentration. In a heavily digitalized and marketed age that is specifically geared toward giving us low value content that has high dopamine associated with it, we are an incredibly addicted and addictive, people, society, right? We latch on to whatever gives us, the instant gratification. And I think reading is the cure to that, going away from that short-term hits and highs to long-term concentration and long-term, gaining of knowledge. The next point is that reading actually gives depth. There's no depth to short-term content. That's a literally contradiction in terms, right? Something that's short-term can't have depth, because in order to get to depth, you need to have time, you need to have substance, right? And that comes from things like reading. Unlike social media, reading works written by people who sat down and spent years of their lives documenting it. It exposes you to full arguments, to nuance, and to feelings like empathy, to actual raw emotion as they were experienced by the people who have written books. And it offers perspective. It's mental travel. We have access to decades of experience. As I said, people have spent years, decades of their lives writing and documenting their journeys. And we can choose to read their stories, and we can choose to give up the 15-second shorts and instead, sacrifice a few hours of time. But in return, we get decades, we get lifespans, we get centuries of knowledge, of emotion, of perspective that allows us to truly, become more knowledgeable and to learn from the previous generations that have come before us. We stand on the shoulders of giants, but right now we're just squandering, and we pay no attention to who or what we stand on. So how do we actually get into reading? Like, how am I going to get more into reading? And I think the first thing is to start small. You can either quantify this in terms of time or by pages. For instance, you can read 10 to 15 minutes a day, or you can read 10 to 15 pages a day. Whatever floats your boat. The important thing is to start small. Second thing is to pick books that excite you. This was the main problem from what I mentioned earlier with the school system. The main reason we've drifted away from books is that they have been pre-selected for us. You want to get back into it? Pick books that are actually enjoyable and actually interest you. That will go a long way. Next thing is the formatting. It's been shown that, reading physical books is often more intriguing to the average person. For me, I'm going to do a mix of both. I want to get away from the digital, but I still want to have the storage benefits of not being limited to having bookshelves of physical storage space. And so what I'm thinking about doing is getting a Kindle, something that is, it's a device that's specifically made for reading. I can't be distracted by anything else. I can't be distracted by social media, but I also have the portability and the storage benefits that come from a digital device. So that's just a personal preference that I'm going with, but feel free, if you're trying to get back into reading, do whatever floats your boat. Next thing is pair it with something enjoyable. If you like coffee shops, go read in a coffee shop. If you prefer quiet spaces, go find some quiet space to read. Or if you like the outdoors, go find a park, go sit down on a bench on a nice sunny day and read your book there. Finding ways to pair reading up with another enjoyable task that you already enjoy doing is a great way to kind of, integrate reading into your life. And with that, that is all I had for this video today. If you found anything of value, feel free to stick around on my YouTube channel where I post new videos every Tuesday and Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And with that, I will see you guys on the next one. Godspeed.